Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Bad Movie Reviews podcast. Don't know what episode this is. I feel like we just avoid that number from now on. 5, probably. Hosted by myself, Ben, Daniel. You can, of course, join us every week. Major podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple, of course, visually on YouTube. So if you're watching, hello. Movie news, not as much as last week. I will touch on this one first, just because we kind of spoke about it a little bit last week in terms of the Fantastic Four director. And I know I spoke that he was linked to direct the new Star Trek as well. Literally 24 hours after we recorded that podcast and it went up for all you listeners, he exited that Star Trek movie. I know I said it was reported that he joined in, so like it's not been fully confirmed in terms of Fantastic Four, but knowing that he's now exited this, the most likely scenario is that it sort of collides with the shooting of Fantastic Four.
Yeah, correct.
So bit shattered for you, I'm sure. Yeah. It's just another year that we don't know when that's coming out.
Yeah, correct. Love my Star Trek, but to be fair, I'd rather have him full focus on one film. Doesn't have to inherently be the one that I would prefer, but as long as he's got his focus on one, he'll probably get to the other eventually. But it does make sense that he's probably chose to opt out of one to
go for a Marvel.
Yeah,
that's true. You can't deny the Marvel. Marvel.
I'd feel one if they gave me a chance.
Don't know what I'm saying. You can't deny the Marvel powerhouse, I guess. You can if you're a good director, but that's fine. Next one, Brendan Gleeson has joined the Joker sequel, which we've spoken about previously, obviously in regards to Lady Gaga joining it and the fact that it was a musical. So Brendan Gleeson joining it. Don't know who he's going to play yet. That's not been confirmed. I really like this casting. I always think Brendan Gleeson should be in more films. I know you had no idea who that was until you looked him up, but that's Mad Eye Moody.
No, I knew that prior.
Oh, no, like they had the picture of him, but you were like not sure what else he'd been because it showed the Mad Eye Moody photo and you're like, what's he from? And then you saw the actual photo and you're like, yeah.
I suck at names so much.
I think Brendan Gleeson's a fantastic actor and I really like that casting. It'd be interesting to see if he plays like a well-known villain or hero, who knows, like whether it's just a random role.
Yeah, I'm probably being real mean here, but he's probably got the physique for a nice penguin, I reckon. For like a bit of an older one.
I don't think they would cast a penguin knowing that they've just done it this year, with Colin Farrell in the Robert Pattinson Batman.
Who knows? Isn't Joker not relevant to like any of the other ones? Didn't they say that it wasn't canon?
Yeah, but like you never know what's going to happen, you know?
Yeah, fair enough. Yep.
This is a bit of we'll move on to the next bit. A bit of Warner Bros. News. We've obviously spoken about them quite a bit. Godzilla v Kong sequel has been announced, so it's pretty much the fourth film in the series, with Adam Wingard to return to direct. I don't know about you, but I've not really... Kong Skull Island I actually enjoyed. I felt like stylistically that film had a lot going for it, but in terms of the actual stories of them all, I've never really... don't know how they're making that much money.
No idea. It's just really a nice, interesting action flick that's got no... I don't even know if there's a story between any of it or all of them, or if any interlink or anything like that. I know that Sportsbet do a multi on it for some reason that...
Yeah, and it was a stalemate, so no one won any money. For anyone who doesn't know, Sportsbet's a betting company here in Oz. We'll jump on to the next bit of the news. This is actually connecting to Warner Bros. I feel like everyone's wanting to jump the ship. Legendary Entertainment, who are a consistent collaborator with Warner Bros.
Massive.
Their contract has expired, so they've apparently been wanting to move away. So potentially... the rumours are Sony or Paramount are very close linked to them. And for instance, anyone who doesn't know, they're already committed to doing Dune 2. That's a connection. And Dune as well as Godzilla v Kong are actually Warner Bros. Best performing movie under the recent HBO Max / same day theatrical experience. Which is interesting. I don't know if you've got any, like Sony or Paramount, if you've got any thoughts on that. I know Dune 2, obviously, and we just spoke about Godzilla v Kong, so whether that's Legendary as well.
Yeah, well, Legendary are massive. It's it's a big get if you're someone like Sony or Paramount looking out there to spend some money on a pretty reputable company that's delivered some some pretty good films.
It is interesting. Next one. This is the last bit of news. Shia LaBeouf has been casted in Francis Ford Coppola's sort of opus film called Megalopolis. I don't know if you know the director. Francis Ford Coppola hasn't really directed any film for quite some time, really. Proper like famous. For anyone who doesn't know, he's directed arguably some of the greatest films of all time, pretty much all the Godfathers and Apocalypse Now, which is well loved as well. For anyone Megalopolis is essentially he's wanted to make it for a while, but budget apparently rumored to be ridiculous and never had the opportunity at the time. It's a sci-fi essentially plots about an architect who wants to rebuild New York City as a utopia following a devastating disaster. But the cast, you have Adam Driver, Aubrey Plaza, Natalie Emmanuel, who was in was that the woman from the one we saw last week, which was shocking, The Invitation?
Yeah, Natalie. Yep.
Yeah, it was, yeah. Well, at least she's doing something good, hey? I don't know how I feel about this. I think Shia LaBeouf's a great actor, but to be honest, I don't feel like he probably should be getting any roles because he's a well-known woman beater.
He's a bit of a coconut smoker, that's for sure.
Well, he's been like he went to jail for literally putting a knife to a woman's throat and threatening to kill her. So
Wowee.
I don't know how I feel about him getting roles. I know he's a great actor, but
Megalopolis. You probably, I don't know if you know the information on. Is that the title of the first ever sci-fi film ever?
I think that's Metropolis.
Oh,
it's close. You're thinking of the movie with the poster with like the golden
it's
person.
Like, we're talking old as, and they experience that like utopia, futuristic sci-fi. So I don't know if it's kind of like taking that idea, but that's the first thing that popped in my head was first sci-fi movie ever. Is that what they're making like a newer version of?
Yeah. Not too sure. I'd love to see Francis Ford Coppola get the money for it. I know it's to me it feels like it could be a similar to Avatar situation with James Cameron, where he's wanted to make it for so long and only made it once he had the technology available and the budget. But apparently, funnily enough, that he's one of the most sort of rewarded directors of all time in terms of what he's achieved. He hasn't been given the budget. Like studios haven't wanted to do it, which is interesting. But other than that, that's pretty much all we've got for movie news. What we might do, I know we touched on Game of Thrones a little bit last week. I don't really have anything to touch on the second episode, apart from I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
but
it's about it.
What we might do is that if Lord of the Rings, Ring of Power came out on Friday, and we have watched the first 2 episodes. I know it's came out that it's the most successful Amazon Prime TV show with 25 million viewers, which to no surprise. But impressions, obviously it's the first 2 episodes, but I'll let you go first. What did you think?
Yeah, I love it. I'm just
I know you would.
you knew I was going to say that instantly.
I personally have relatively mixed opinions at certain aspects, but I also enjoyed it, but I'll let you go on.
Oh, I loved it just because I'm kind of semi-obsessed with a bit of Lord of the Rings, as you know. So it's I enjoyed it. Of course, it was just kind of like a build-up to a lot more to come. I liked the introduction of certain key characters. Obviously having like Elrond in there, Celebrimbor and Galadriel, which I thought was fantastic. And it was actually seeing like the scenes of like Valinor I thought was awesome, which is that like super golden place at the end there, also known as the Undying Lands. If you read any of the Lord of the Rings books, it's
I've read them all.
It's where Bilbo went at like the end of the movie. He went over to the Undying Lands. You have to be invited there with his godlike beings and stuff. Anyway, sidetrack. Yeah, I like that. I like the introduction of the characters. I think that it was kind of just like building that foundation. I don't think a lot happened, which maybe is something that you touched on.
Yeah,
you were going to touch on is I don't think a lot happened. I think it was really just like here's a cool, super awesome like introduction to all the characters that'll be present. Here's the enemy. Here's Morgoth's lieutenant, Sauron. There's, some introductions.
I can't remember what you said. For anyone, I mean, I'm sure you've probably watched it, or if you're not watched it, you probably won't really, because anyone who wants to watch it will at this point. But I can't remember whose name you said, like the meteor person. You're like, oh, that's that person. I wanted to say, I actually looked that up. That's not been confirmed. Apparently, it's not. and there's rumors going around that it's potentially Gandalf, which would fucking infuriate me.
Oh.
I'm sorry, my language, but
Yeah, I was
who
unsure
doesn't
on that.
speak?
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, now shit's gonna happen. I was like, why? And you're like, oh, it's this person.
There was a couple ones that
Couple
could have been.
rumors, yeah.
I was
But,
unsure.
The rumors online are that it might be Gandalf, which would anger me quite a bit. But I'll touch on my. I'll firstly touch on my good thoughts. It looks incredible.
Oh.
Like visually, you can tell it's expensive. Not only that, but the shots, the vistas, it all looks beautiful and it looks fantastic. None of the like CGI looked bad. It was quite good. Some of the acting was quite good. The specific scene with Elrond and Durin was great, and there was like I actually felt that connection and those performances. In terms of there's not anything I have like where I didn't like I really didn't like, but I've got some relatively mixed opinions. It doesn't feel like Peter Jackson's world. Like I know it's obviously a Tolkien thing, but like in terms of connecting to Lord of the Rings, which you're realistically going to have to do, and The Hobbit, because you've got existing characters, it doesn't necessarily feel like his world. And even the characters, which I enjoyed their performances, Elrond probably a bit more than Galadriel, but it didn't feel like I didn't sit there and go, that's, Kate Blanchett's Galadriel, or that's Hugo Weaving's Elrond. Like they just felt different in a way. Not only that, I also felt like the characters were unrelatable for me. One thing with Lord of the Rings, I really, really connect with the characters, but like even the scene with the ice troll, where like you look at the scene in Lord of the Rings with the ice troll, where like Frodo and Sam are nearly gonna get fucking absolutely belted. Galadriel, like there's a sense of like horror there, whereas Galadriel just took the piss out of it and just in an instant. Which I know elves are supposed to be quite thin, but even like you look at Lord of the Rings, you look at Legolas, and he never really took the absolute piss out of anyone where he killed someone within 2 seconds. It's a massive troll, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's how I felt. I felt bored a little bit too. Like I didn't connect to any of the characters, as I just said, but my thing is like nothing happened really. 2 hours in to nine or so hours, because there'll be 9 episodes. 2 hours in, I didn't feel hooked in a sense. And I know I can sit there and say it's setting up the characters, it's setting up this, but if you really think about it, with how long the Lord of the Rings movies actually are, this whole series probably equals the 3 Lord of the Rings series, right? But if I'm sitting there, and even on the first watch, if I'm sitting there and thinking about Lord of the Rings in the Fellowship, after 2 hours, I'm hooked, if that makes sense. Like realistically, this isn't a TV show. This is a 9-hour movie in a way, the way they've made it. And I just didn't feel like it really hooked me like the Lord of the Rings did. And I highly doubted it would to begin with, because obviously Lord of the Rings is one of the most coveted, loved movies of all time, movie series. But I'm intrigued to see where it goes. Like I'll watch it. I enjoyed aspects, but I just felt like mixed feelings across the board though as well. I don't know how you feel that I've brought those up, but I'm keen to see what happens and where it goes. But yeah, those are my feelings. I really wanted to love it, but I felt like comparing it, I know they're fantasy shows, but comparing it, like House of the Dragon has hooked me, and I really like a lot of the characters in that show with the first 2 episodes. Obviously, that's not streaming, so they're releasing weekly. It's the same time, I feel a lot more connected and not relatable, because Game of Thrones characters are a bit cooked, but I feel a lot more hooked to House of Dragon and to see where that goes than Rings of Power.
Yeah, look, that's fair. The Game of Thrones is obviously they're humans, so humans are a lot easier relatable. Elves with their own kind of thing, it just is all different.
But it's not even that, because I found all the elves in the original trilogies likable and relatable, if that makes sense. Like it's not like I'm sitting there being like, fuck, I can relate to Legolas running on a 20-foot elephant, like you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
It's more so much the characters are grounded and like likable and relatable in sense. Like they just felt.
How many seasons are they announced? Because
I think I actually don't know.
Because if there's a second or third, I think you'll enjoy that a lot more. Because right now we're at the first stage of the entire series, where it's kind of even the first stage in a lot of the lore just builds up to kind of all the epic stuff.
I think they announced it's the second age, so 3,000 years before the original.
Still got aspect. They've only just introduced Celebrimbor. I thought it was still first age, because it was after Morgoth's destruction. Obviously, Morgoth's lieutenant Sauron is then coming.
I may be wrong. I thought I looked it up during because we were talking.
It might be, but obviously,
look, I tend to agree. I'm just thinking like in terms of time and how much time invested, like the 2 hours, as I said, like compared to the first 2 hours of that, compared to the first 2 hours of even The Lord of the Rings or even The Hobbit, like the characters, it just kind of missed a spot for me. But I mean, who knows? We're obviously going in to the next few episodes, it might turn a corner for me. I might love it, but that's how I felt. And I not to say I didn't enjoy it. It's just I guess those are my expectations of everything connected to The Lord of the Rings, which I've consumed, not so much The Hobbit, but I feel so deeply connected to that series. Love it. I read it as a kid, watched it as a kid, and it's just I mean, we'll see where it goes, but
I've got the I think we've got like two levels of bias. And then, like, mine is on, like, just because I love it so much.
Yeah, you just want to consume anything, like anything,
anything. Just give me anything.
The shittiest movie, you're like, yeah, but give me a
30-second mobile game. I'll play it.
I'm like that, but I guess I'm trying to come from take that bias aside and come from a bit of a critical standpoint as well, which probably doesn't help
much
because it makes me more annoyed in a sense. But other than that was all we had in terms of TV impressions. What we might do is might take a quick drink break and we'll come back with our movie reviews. This week we're reviewing Orphan Kills and 3,000 Years of Longing. So we'll take a quick break and we'll come to you in a second. Easy, so we'll get into our review. We'll touch on Orphan Kills first because we probably have a little bit less to discuss on that one than 3,000 Years of Longing. But Orphan Kills, obviously, not obviously, but it's the prequel to the 2009 film called Orphan, which I actually haven't seen. I know you...
That's the first time ever that I reckon I've seen a film.
I think I've seen it, but I can't confirm. But I know you said you hadn't, and then halfway through watching this film, you're like, it's that film. It actually have. I'll let you touch on that first, Orphan Kills. What were your thoughts?
Don't know. It wasn't a kind of spectacular masterpiece. Probably better than the last two films we watched last week. But
I think, mate, I could watch a shit stain. I could watch, I could watch a video of me, taking a massive... Sorry.
Anyway,
my language.
Look, I know you're probably going to touch on it. I think I already saw on your notes. It headed in a direction I didn't think it would, because I wasn't sure how you're going to have a prequel to this kind of character that's already like a psychopath and blends their way into like a family and then manipulates them all, and then sometimes they kill them, sometimes they don't, sometimes she just steals stuff. It's kind of a bit of everything. And I was like, it's just going to be another one of those movies. And it wasn't like that at all. And I'm sure you're going to touch on the same thing. I was not expecting the plot to go in the direction it did. And for me, that's actually what made the movie a lot better, was it actually broke all those expectations. And look, I enjoyed it. I thought some of the shots were pretty cool. I thought she was it was very well acted. The girl.
It was well acted. It was weirdly done because it,
30-year-old.
It's the same woman who played the orphan in the first movie. So she's technically playing a younger version of herself that she played 14 years ago.
She CGI'd? I don't even know.
She's CGI'd onto a young body, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You can kind of tell in the shots where it's not just like it. If you haven't noticed, 90% of the scenes with her are all close-ups, which are done on purpose. And then there's certain scenes where it shows like a shot, but it's always her like back or like not her face from
Lord of the Rings, brother. They did the same thing. And they used to cut scenes and place them over the top of each other. Anyway, sidetrack to Lord of the Rings. I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was pretty good. There wasn't too much to, I guess, kind of touch on other than that plot, I think. It made the movie a lot more enjoyable. I'd recommend that people watch it, but I wouldn't say it was a kind of spectacular film.
I think it's a movie.
It's a movie.
It's not, I guess you kind of finished off there, I guess, so I'll touch on my thoughts. It was well acted. Like, I'll give that props. I must say, the plot twist was really interesting. I didn't necessarily expect that specifically to happen, but when watching the film, I actually kind of did say to you, I was like, something's off. But that kind of did make the payoff and make the movie a lot more interesting, but other than that, it's a whatever movie, to be honest. Like, it exists. It's not... I don't know where it's going, though, to be honest, because, like, it's not scary at all.
No,
It's not really scary whatsoever. It's kind of like a thriller, but it doesn't make you feel. It never made me feel uncomfortable or like, I know you said the first one made you feel really uncomfortable. This one never made me sit there and go I winced more at watching The Invitation and The Beast, even though they weren't scary. It was just more that they were bad. But but this film just never made me feel anything really. It was just kind of like had the plot twist. I was like, yeah, that's kind of cool, interesting, kind of interesting. But other than that, I must say, and I actually said this to you, that the CGI was possibly some of the worst CGI I've ever seen. It actually topped Beast and Invitation at times.
I don't even reckon I noticed it.
Are we talking about the end in the house fire? Sorry to touch on spoilers.
Oh my God.
You actually said, you're like, why does this look like...
Oh, I completely forgot about that last scene like it didn't happen.
Bear in mind, there's not much CGI in the movie at all, and it looks fine, and then it's to the point like it reaches like a big budget, ending where something's happening and there's a lot going on, and it just looks shocking. Like it looks real bad. I don't know what the budget is because I tried to look it up, but it didn't state it.
I'm actually upset thinking about that CGI now that I've had a rethink about it.
Yeah. No. Look, I don't think it's necessarily an awful film. I think like if you enjoy, like, not creepy, if you just enjoy like a bit of a movie, that kind of makes you sit there, you think, a bit of a plot twist, then by all means go see it. I don't think it's anything special. I think it's one of those just movies to potentially see on a Wednesday night when you're not doing anything. Oh, this is on at 8, let's go watch it. But that's our sort of review for that one. But we'll jump on to 3,000 Years of Longing, which I know Daniel's probably a bit keen to talk about, and even I am. For anyone who doesn't know, it's George Miller's, a fellow Australian, George Miller's newest film that's starring Idris Elba and Tilda Swinton. Essentially about a scholar, or was it a scholar? She narrates, was it? Yeah. She works with books and tells stories, and she essentially finds a little bottle and uncovers a genie and wants 3 wishes, basically. That's, I guess, the plot it gets 3 wishes. That's basically the plot in the most bare bones way possible. We will probably chat spoilers, so we'll let you know at that point. But I guess if you want to just chat about the movie first, and then we can get into the sort of more in-depth discussion. What were your initial feelings on the movie?
Yeah, we might have some initial thoughts, so we might just take a break and then run through some of those spoilers because I've got a fair bit to touch on. I really liked the film, actually. I went in thinking, what's he stitching me up for here? You know what? I just have these ideas in my head that sometimes that I'm like, this is not going to go in a direction I'm going to like, but, I'm going to put my heart and soul into it and give it a go, and thank God I did because it was a good film. And it got me thinking a lot more than I thought it did. And it took a while for my old brain to tick over and realise kind of what I thought was going on.
What your interpretation
is. And that's one of the best parts about it too, is actually you can watch the whole film and have an interpretation of it and then watch it again. And I reckon I could think of something completely different that would contradict everything that I'm currently thinking. I thought it was very thought-provoking. I thought it was well cast and well acted. I think there was a lot of deliberate shots when you
everything's there for a reason.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it. There's not much really that I kind of going to touch on unless I go really into that plot.
Yeah, just bare bones what your thoughts were.
I enjoyed it. Definitely worth a watch. Have a think. Would love to hear everyone's thoughts on it. What about yours?
I really enjoyed it. I'm a big fan of George Miller. I love one of my favourite movies of all time, Mad Max Fury Road. Obviously, this is a complete departure from that kind of film. I thought the directing was fantastic, and both performances by Idris Elba and Tilda Swinton were really well done, and they had great chemistry, which kind of made you believe everything that was going on. I really enjoyed the fact that it kind of leaned into the COVID era of a movie, if that makes sense. Like, it would have been made through COVID, but it was all about, like, you can tell it was made in 90% of it in a hotel room, 2 people, everyone was room. Like, not that I think it's a bad route. I just think like it kind of goes that route well done. At times the movie looks fantastic, but then at sometimes some of the CGI is very iffy. That's probably my only bare bones negative thought. But And the other thing I really wanted to touch on is that the sound design is second to none. Like sound design in this film is unreal at times, and even the score, who Junkie XL I believe did it, who did Mad Max Fury Road, score was really good. But I guess other than that, I highly recommend everyone going to see it. As Daniel kind of touched on, and as I've kind of briefly touched on, it's a film where you can kind of watch it and go, oh, that's a good romantic movie, or that's a good, movie about telling stories or something like that.
Yeah.
But some other people might really look at it in depth, or not even in depth, but some people will really have different interpretations of this, which I think is good because it gets people talking. And I guess that's what, I personally love about movies. I always love seeing a movie, chatting to my friends, seeing what they thought. But I highly recommend seeing it. What we'll do, for anyone who hasn't seen it, I'd probably recommend maybe stop listening there and go and see it. What we might do here is we'll take a quick break and we'll actually get into an in-depth kind of talk about what our personal thoughts and interpretations are, because it's definitely one to get talking. So if you haven't seen the movie and want to, we'll probably listen to us next week. If otherwise, if you just want to listen to us talk about the spoilers, we'll chat to you in a second. Easy. So for anyone who's continued to listen, you're obviously wanting to hear our in-depth, relatively spoiler discussions in terms of 3,000 Years of Longing. Otherwise, if you're still listening and you haven't seen it, then and you want to, then you probably flick off after my fourth warning. In terms of, I guess, my thoughts, I probably want to chat on one thing first. That I guess you can kind of really get two different things, or a few different things from this movie. You can kind of watch it, and what I really enjoyed is I think it's like deep down it's a really nice movie about telling stories and things like that. But I actually think it really does and sort of looks into story of love really well, especially with the specific stories that the Jinn tells in the hotel room. One thing I didn't actually touch on before is personally I felt like I really, really relished everything in the hotel room, the telling stories, the going back in time. And I felt like when they went to London, I know you were the actual opposite. When they went to London, I felt like it lost me a bit because it kind of travelled astray a little bit from what the original hour and 20 minutes, was doing. But the kind of the first story that the Jinn tells is kind of a story about, we can't control who we love, which it's just super interesting. And the second story, it's kind of I guess, is an exposition on love comes in all shapes and forms, and we need to accept that. And I guess the third story that he also goes through is you can't force someone to love you, with the woman who wants to learn everything. And the main story between the Jinn and I forgot her name, Alithia, I guess true love and true care for people kind of comes from, I guess, giving complete freedom and thought and complete freedom over their thoughts and emotions and actions. It's essentially, I don't want to touch, I guess, too deep into it, but spoiler wise, obviously, I kind of have to touch on it in terms of when they talk about longing, and that's the thing. I think the film, it's in the title, longing and love, and I think it kind of looks at both pretty heavily, and kind of what the difference is between the two, and what people desire. Obviously, they talk about what women desire, but what people desire, and it's interesting that was kind of one of her wishes is I want you to love me. And that was the whole thing of I found that interesting because the whole story of the second one was, or the third one is, he wanted her to love her, right? And he didn't allow her to wish because he loved her so much. He just wanted to be around her regardless of if it's, I'm confined to this space. And then she wished that, and he's like, as you wish, right? But then obviously he gets ill because of all the electromagnetic waves. He doesn't deal well with the all that situation in terms of technology because it's later in life. And she lets him free, right? Because of love. You love someone, let them go. And it's interesting. Obviously, he was forced to love her because it was a wish, but it's actually him. As I said, it's complete freedom over their thoughts, emotions, and now that he's not like with her, he actually at the end of the film, he obviously travels back to see her every so often. But that's kind of what I really, I guess, what I kind of thought overall the story was about. Obviously, there's certain theories about, I'm sure, what you were to touch on, like, or even watching it, I can kind of. There's stuff there which made me feel like it's all an interpretation, it's all an imagination thing by Alithia, and then there's stuff where I think that were deliberately planted there to make me think maybe it's not, maybe it is happening, and then there was stuff there to make me think the main character's actually also a djinn, which I'll get into, but I'll actually let you chat a little bit because I've probably rambled on, but I'll let you chat about sort of your thoughts and what you thought in terms of your interpretation.
Yeah, well, I think you've touched on some really good points there, actually, that maybe I hadn't even thought about. When we were talking about it previously, it's not that I didn't enjoy the hotel scene, and it wasn't until they went to London. It was.
I know you meant like in terms of the way the story went.
Yeah, I just like the first part. I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's a nice story, but like, what's its relevance? And then it hit London, and I was like, oh, and like obviously I had my interpretation by the time they hit London. The first thing I see when she walks into her house is a photo of the djinn's eyes and bodies and legs on the wall, as in like it's just art she's got around the house. He's already him. And I was like, oh, it's this, maybe that's kind of weird. I don't know how she's already got these photos. And then the neighbors popped up. And then I was like, now I get it. Now I get it. It's actually something that we kind of talked about a little bit last week, BioShock, obviously with the movie, things like that. They actually kind of invented a mythological psychology thing of the Lettuce twins, which are two twins kind of sometimes talk over each other at the same time, have differing opinions. They actually have the ability to like perceive different realities and stuff like that, which will go on to some of my points later, why that's important, that they can perceive different kind of realities. But I thought the whole story was actually about I think it was very much about love and longing, and I think it's important on mental health too, and how mental health affects love and longing and relationships. And she always felt like she
I'm
had
depressed, bro. Yeah.
fair, same. She always felt like she had this most complete life, but in times of where she struggled the most, whether it was life, death, sickness, being in the orphanage or asylum, or whatever she was in, it kind of doesn't really go into either or. When she was at her worst time, she kind of created or found love to kind of fill that void. And it never actually ever filled the void because it was never real. And yeah, I think it kind of touches on...
Love isn't real, yeah, correct.
I think it touches on, kind of how... like mental health and love all combine all together. I think the whole thing was kind of made up all in her head, personal opinion there. But I think that the story itself is all about how love affects mental health and mental health affects love, and that, you know, she was in a bad place in her life where she was so depressed, she started hallucinating and she fell in love with this djinn, and she actually kind of got him down to a point of where he was nearly dying, and he was trying to do the right thing and be with her while she's not in a state where she could actually...
because it was a wish, yeah.
Yeah, and he wasn't mentally capable of taking care of someone who was so mentally unstable. And same with her. She couldn't, fill those voids that she needed to fill that. And then so it was by the time she actually accepted it, started to work on it, finished what she needed to do, worked on herself, that it was a good time for them to, in the relationship, to come back together. That's what I thought it was all about, at least. That's kind of half of my thoughts on that one.
Yeah, no, I had moments where I thought this is in her imagination, and there are bits that really lean into that in terms of, obviously there's the exposition that she talks about that she created a childhood friend, and even obviously the fact that she really delves into fairy tales, and obviously she writes the book at the end saying this is my fairy tale, blah, blah, blah. I also thought there were certain things that kind of, though, lent into the fact that maybe it is all real, which was like the situation where she goes through the airport and she's trapped the genie in that little glass jar and it goes off. And I thought maybe that's because the electromagnetic waves are in the glass.
I like that.
And then obviously there's I know you said the twins bit, but even though like she introduces them, they obviously look up. But the main bit obviously towards the end of the film where he's kick the soccer ball, the kids actually react to that. But you could also play in, she's imagining it. So it's a hard one, but
yeah.
I know they talk about obviously like half gins as well. In the movie, they actually talk about the possibilities of that, and I actually thought that might be a situation where she was actually half gin. The main reason is, as you can tell, gins are storytellers at the end of the day, and she was heavily a storyteller. As you can tell, that was, her occupation. That was what she did. She was also a solitary creature, and that's what she actually called herself.
Yeah.
One thing they chat about is the fact that their first relationship, which obviously really sort of left her affected heavily mentally, the main reason her husband left her was because she couldn't conceive, and that was one of the things they touched on is half gins actually can't have babies. The movie, she also sees supernatural creatures. You've got the little thing at the airport, at the keynote speech. She's also directly led to the bottle at the shop in Turkey, which they chatted about in the second story, where one of them was the half gin. He went straight to the bottle as well. She hears you chatted about this, but she also hears the multiple voices from the neighbors, so it was talking over each other, and that was something where it can play into obviously the frequencies and things like that, but also obviously she heard the same frequencies at times with the sound design. She actually heard the same frequencies as Idris Elba's character, the jinn. So there were moments where I thought, oh, okay, maybe she's half jinn, which isn't necessarily a major plot point really. It's just things you pick up on, and I'm sure when watching again, which I 100% will, you'll pick up on things, because I know you just chatted about the fact that you entered her house and you see a photo or painting of the jinn, and I actually didn't even notice that. And with the film, I didn't notice that, but 99% of the film, there are things that you pick up on the frame where might not be in focus, but you pick up on things that are obviously directly and deliberately put there. But I think it's heavily a film where you really have your own interpretation. You can think, obviously, it's all in the imagination. You can think it's not, it's real. Or you can, as I said, you could sit there and think, oh, it's just a love story. It's an interesting one, but I guess you had some notes. I don't know if you had anything you didn't really touch on in terms of that.
I was going to touch on a few more things, but funny enough, your theory then actually makes a little bit more sense with some of the points I was going to say.
Oh, go on. You can bring them up.
Well, half gin, right, is because I'm like, okay, she's a psychopath. She's got things going. Well, she's not a psychopath. She's got things going wrong upstairs.
Not a psychopath. There's a lot going on.
There's a few nuts and bolts not working up there, is what I'm thinking. Because she's got, obviously, she goes through this childhood trauma, and she ends up having a imaginary friend.
I can't remember
Eros,
her name. Yeah.
I think his name was, or something like that. It was started with an E. Anyway, she has this imaginary friend. He obviously disappears once she starts to become better, and I'm like, well, because she's just kind of filled that void. But the point I was going to make with that is she goes, when she's talking to the jinn, she goes, the jinn says to her, you always wanted him to be real. She said, yeah, I always wanted him to be real. And she goes, and now I'm here. He says, now I'm here.
Yeah.
Or something along the lines of that. So pretty much confirmed that he was.
I kind of thought that, but then it also, I thought that originally. I was like, that's a weird dialogue, like line of dialogue. But
yeah, but
I don't know whether that was just a thing about when you have that someone in need, I'm here. That was what I thought it was originally. I was like, it's a weird line, but then you could look into it. Yeah,
your half jinn theory makes a lot more sense now, because unless you're granting a wish, no one else can see a jinn because of just the way things are in the magical world or whatever. But a jinn can see another one and vice versa. So because she's half, then she would be able to see another jinn, magic creature.
Yeah.
And that's why she only sees them in like glimpses here and there, is because she's part here and there. That makes a lot more sense. You make some good points there. Well, that makes sense. And then obviously, I don't know, there could be something to do with the neighbours there. The neighbours have the ability to, if it follows that psychology thing that BioShock invented back in like 2000 and 11 or whatever it is, and it's been used a few times in a couple of movies or other games now where they can perceive other realities. That was going to be my point to say that also, she's a psychopath. But if she's part Jinn and they can perceive other realities, well, then there's an idea that they could also perceive that. So, man, there's so much to think about with this movie.
I think you probably, in terms of word, maybe she's not okay rather than psychopath.
Yes, upstairs. A bit like myself, there's a few things missing.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something you can watch and I think pick up on multiple things. It's not like an ending like Inception where like there's a lot of discussion about it in terms of like being ambiguous. It's like the movie does end and it's like it's just, I guess, your interpretation of certain aspects in the film. So
I agree.
I really loved it though, and I think everyone watches it and gets something different. And
watch it a couple of times. I want to watch it again.
Yeah, I would recommend watching it and watching it twice. And I feel like it's definitely something like, I feel like Nope as well, where it's like you probably watch it again and you pick up on things, and that's kind of a film where it really did end as well, and it's not ambiguous. It was like there's an ending, but it's not like a film, I don't know if you actually, I was going to say a film, but you haven't seen it. I was going to say Prisoners, but there's certain films where it'll end and it's like, oh shit, it ended on not a cliffhanger, but like a questionable thing where like, oh, is that the way this is? That's the way. But no, I definitely think it's a great movie and I highly recommend watching it. Other than that, do you sort of have anything, or is that kind of all you had to touch on?
Yeah, I could just rabble on forever. That's pretty much all I'll touch on for now.
Yeah, easy. Well, other than that, that's kind of all we had to touch on this week. We'll be back next week. I'm not exactly sure what we'll be reviewing at this stage because I'm not too sure what comes out. But other than that, you can catch us on all podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, but Amazon as well, and obviously the visual aspect on YouTube. But other than that, we hope you had a great day and enjoyed listening, and we'll chat to you next week.
Thanks, everyone.